You expect me to preach now? I think these readings are particularly comforting for us, despite whatever our weeks held, or maybe in addition to whatever our weeks held, or because of whatever our weeks have held for each of us. I spent time with the readings on Thursday before leaving early Friday morning for Coral Gables, and then spent time last night trying to figure out what I was going to say today. And what I said at the meeting on Friday was, would everybody be particularly inspirational in what he or she is saying? Because I'll be using that on Sunday morning. So they tried really hard to be inspirational at the board meeting when we're talking about things like the budget. But it was a great weekend, and I will try to share some of the excitement of what it means for us. We celebrate today our 3rd anniversary as Faith Family United Church of Christ. 3 years ago, we said, hey, we want to throw in our lot with yours. We want to be in covenant with you because we believe that you are preaching the Word of God the way it needs to be preached, so that there is no exclusion for people, so that there is, as always, a concern for justice and for the poor. And that's who we want to be too. And so we remain in covenant with them. And covenant is that bond we have. It's a sacred agreement when we say, hey, you know what? We're gonna try to be all we can be. And together we will be the branches, those love branches of the vine that is God. That's what we'll try to be. And so when I looked at today's first reading, the line that struck me that I think we need to hear with our Easter ears was this: we love because Christ first loved us. We can't love otherwise. I think it's something else we do if we don't know that God is love, that God taught us, gave us this gift named love, and asked us to share it with whomever it was we would choose as our most intimate persons. And then, because that too strengthened it, to share it beyond those who were family and friend and beloved. And so I think that's a really critical line for us to remember. Reverend Judy Bagley Bonner, who's one of the co-pastors at Faith UCC in Bradenton, is part of my clergy group. And she taught me about this website. It's called Rev Gale Blog Pals. And the interesting thing about it is there's always commentary about the readings for the week, but it's never signed. So I never know who wrote it. But you have to be a Rev Gale and be admitted to this closed group. But here's what I read on that site, and I just wanted to share it because it made sense to me. Love is how God chooses to communicate with us. First, by sending Jesus into our experience, and continuing to do so by expecting each of us to be part of loving relationships and communities. We just don't love for no reason. We get called into this unique and special relationship that we find really hard to wrap words around. If someone ever said to you, when you were about to be married or about to do a union of some sort, and said, well, can you tell me why you love that person and why you want to be the partner of that person or you want to be married to that person? Did you get your old laundry list out and say, well, these are the reasons? Elizabeth Barrett Browning did. Let me count the ways. Remember that poem? I love the breadth and depth and whatever of you. I forget, I haven't taught English in a bit. But I thought, really? You can count the ways? I think love is that indefinable, indescribable experience where we let that God spark in us, called our souls, reach out and touch the God spark in somebody else. And we can do that on the most intimate level, and we can do it on less intimate levels. It doesn't matter. But when souls and hearts unite, that's something special. It's something really special. Of this reading, Alan Bream says, God's love calls us to enter into the messy, complex world of flawed people. If you've ever been in love, is it messy? If you've even loved somebody, I'm not talking about being in love, but loving somebody. Loving a neighbor, loving a pet, loving whatever. Loving a child, loving a parent, loving, an adopted family. Isn't it messy? I just have to say, we got home late last night, and between late last night and early this morning, I was up with Angel twice, who was sick to his stomach. Josh, who decided twice in the middle of the night that he needed to go out, and Callie, who had a hairball this morning. So I'm just telling you, love can be messy. Love can be messy. Thank God Mary was okay. God's love calls us to enter into the messy, complex world of flawed people. Does anybody know anybody who lacks flaws? Because if you do, I can share my email with you, because people tell me all the time what mine are. Right? And here's the thing. You're not telling me anything I don't already know. But do we know anybody without flaw? Oh, really? I don't think so. But if you do, I want to know that person. So this complex world of flawed people, and we are to live as witnesses to God's love for each and every one of them. All the messy people. All the flawed people that are in our lives. Geoffrey Black, who's our general minister of the United Church of Christ and the president of the United Church of Christ, whatever that means. I think it means the same thing, like when I put down that I'm president of Faith Family, I'm the person they send the suing letter to. The lawyer sends that letter to the person whose name is there. But he said this, we live in a VUCA world. We live in a VUCA world. VUCA. Our world is volatile. Our world is volatile. Look around. Just check the news this week. Our world is uncertain. I come to work today, I get a pink slip. That's what Nancy told me. Right? It's an uncertain world. How many times are we surprised by things that aren't pleasant? But it's also uncertain in good ways, if you think about it. Sometimes positive stuff happens, but most of all, there's this uncertainty. What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? Anybody worry about that this morning? Worry about what's going to happen next this morning? Yeah. Because we do. Volatile, uncertain, complex. Just like Alan Bream says, it's a complex world we find ourselves in, and an ambiguous world. But we can't really count on stuff where it's ambiguous to us. We don't really know what it means. We just keep trying to find our way through the seaweed and the sand that we've churned up and the manta rays. Anybody been snorkeling or scubaing this week? Yeah. No? The first time my sister took me snorkeling, did I tell you that story? We jump off this raft, we're in the Keys, and we get back on it an hour later, and she says, do you know what a manta ray looks like? I go, no. She goes, okay. Do you know what's the fish with teeth?
Barracuda.
What is it? Barracuda. Do you know what a barracuda looks like? No. She goes, okay, get back in the water. That's our world. That's our world. And you think about it, isn't that world when you go to work some days? Who's going to be the barracuda? Who's going to be the manta ray? Who's going to just slosh up all that sand and get it all in our face so we can't see where we're going? Because that happens a lot. Right? That's the world we live in, this VUCA world. Now you learned something today. VUCA. People probably think you're swearing at them when you say it, so enunciate. Okay? But despite that, we're called to love one another. If you don't love your sister or your brother, then how can you say you love God, is what the first passage asks us. We have to really ponder that, because we're called over and over in the messiness of it all. And Julian told me about some of the messiness this past week, right? Yeah, but then you got a nice present that you posted online, so there. So it's an uncertain world, and you never really know what's going to happen, okay? And so on Thursday before I leave, I pondered the second reading. You know, the branches, the vine and the branches. I am the vine. You are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit. Because apart from me, you can do nothing. Do we take that one to heart? Apart from me, you can do nothing. Oh, you can do a lot of things. But do they matter? You can do a lot of things. Because I'm on the board of directors, we were put up in the hotel that was right across the street from where we met on Friday and where we met on Saturday. It's in a really nice area of Coral Gables. And the name of the hotel we stayed at was the Biltmore. And I will tell you this. There's a lot of people walking around in there. And I know every time I walked in, I would think as I walked through the door, boy, I am just like nobody else in this hotel, not even motel, hotel. I am just like nobody else here. And I would just laugh because I had on my Bell's Outlet sandals and my little polyester pants that I bought at the yard sale, and and a polyester blouse that someone had given me, and I'm thinking, ooh, I bet the coffee you just bought costs more than everything I'm wearing. But that stuff doesn't matter. I don't want to be able to do that stuff. I thought it'd be really cool to say, oh, I stayed at the Biltmore. I'm like, really? It was $19 for a hamburger. Oh, for a hamburger. Mary fasted the whole first day. I was at the meeting, and we had oranges. That's not the important stuff. Without me, without God, that's the me. You can do nothing. You can do nothing that really makes your heart and your soul sing. Without God. Because all the other stuff we do doesn't matter if we're not doing it with the love that God gave us. And you know what? Sometimes we do it with love, not even knowing we're doing it with love. We just bite our tongue or bite our lip when we really want to say something. Did you ever think about that as God's love or the Holy Spirit acting in you and keeping you from saying something mean? Did you ever really stop and think that, that's spirit? And spirit's got me by the tongue, so I can't use it to hurt anybody. But that's God's love operating too. Because there are times in our messy world we want to say some things. Peter Sharpen says of this, branches, we bear fruit. Let me read you this one first. We bear fruit not by squeezing it out of ourselves, but because we are extensions of the vine. We bear fruit not by squeezing it out of ourselves, but because we are extensions of the vine that is God. And she also says, branches don't live off their own fruit. The fruit is for someone else. Isn't that true? We don't live off our own fruit. We may live off somebody else's that they give us that helps our heart and soul survive and grow and flourish. And somebody lives off ours. John Vertigan, who was installed yesterday as our new Florida Conference Minister, spoke about an author named Luke Johns, and I forgot the name of the book. But in that book, Luke Johns talks about when you go to church, you can have a good experience or you can have a religious experience. And I think it reflects on this reading. He says, if you go and you have a good experience, you listen to the Word as it's given to us in music, as it's given to us as we break open Scripture, as it's given to us in the message from whoever's preaching that day. And at the end of the service, you shake the pastor's hand, you go, good service, good sermon, and you walk out the door and that's it. That's when you have a good experience at church. Okay, he only gives us two, so when you have some other kind of experience other than good or religious, oh well, it's not in the book. Religious experience. You listen to how the Word is broken open, how we share it. And what he says is, and when you leave here, you go and sell everything you have. And you take that money and you use it to care for the wounds of the broken and the brokenhearted. I know there are people in here who do that every Sunday. That you care for the wounds of the broken and the brokenhearted. Some of you on the way to church, some of you on the way home from church. That you leave here not thinking, boy, I'm filled up, I got my fruit, I'm done, I'm good. But you leave here bearing fruit for somebody who needs it, that nobody else has given it to them, to sustain them, to just even sustain them. David Luce, whom I know you love, I love, says, when Jesus offers these words to the disciple, he offers them on the eve of his crucifixion. Sometimes it's important for us to think about the context of when in Jesus' life he says this. And this is what David Luce adds. If the cross means anything, I think it means that God chose not to sit back in heaven, removed from the pain and paucity of our mortal, free, and difficult life in this world. Can you see God just sitting back in heaven? God doesn't do that. It's not the unmoved mover, those of you who did that philosophy years ago. But rather came in Christ to be joined to it. The ups and downs, the hopes and disappointments, the frailties and faults of our life in this world, so that we would know of God's unending commitment to us. The cross was not the instrument that made it possible for God to love us. The cross is evidence and testimony to just how much God already loved us, and God's promise to be with us through all things. Just so, the resurrection is the promise that no matter how much tragedy we endure, these hardships will not have the last word. I don't know about you, but I tend to forget when times get tough that I'm not alone in it. I tend to forget that at that moment, when I'm feeling the most unloved and probably the most unlovable, because they tend to go together, God's arms are wrapped so tight around me, hugging me and telling me how much I'm loved that I missed it. I missed it. And we hope not to miss it next time. I'm going to share two short stories. This is from my friend Terry, who said, I said, I need something inspirational to share with my church tomorrow. He used this as his prayer on Friday to open our meeting, and then he slid it across the table to me. And all the people that wanted a copy, too bad they didn't get it. It's called the cracked pot. Not crackpot, because he kept looking at me when he was reading it. The cracked pot. A water bearer in India had 2 large pots. Have you heard this? Mary has. Each hung on each end of a pole which he carried across his neck. One of the pots had a crack in it, while the other pot was perfect, and always delivered a full portion of water at the end of the long walk from the stream to the master's house. The cracked pot arrived only half full. For a full 2 years, this went on daily, with the bearer delivering only 1.5 pots of water in his master's house. Of course, the perfect pot was proud of its accomplishments, perfect to the end for which it was made. But the poor cracked pot was ashamed of its own imperfection, and miserable that it was only able to accomplish half of what it had been made to do. Ever have one of those days when you feel like you're not even accomplishing half of what God's calling you to do? I have. After 2 years of what it perceived to be a bitter failure, it spoke to the water bearer one day and said, "I am ashamed of myself, and I want to apologize to you." "Why?" asked the bearer. "What are you ashamed of?" Imagine Christ as the bearer. "I have been able for these past 2 years to deliver only half my load because this crack, this imperfection, this flaw in my side causes water to leak out all the way back to the master's house. Because of my flaws, you have to do all of this work and you don't get full value from your efforts." Oh, Jesus, do I pray that? I wish I wasn't flawed. I wish it didn't leak out. I wish it was there. The water bearer felt sorry for the old cracked pot, and in his compassion said, "As we return to the master's house, I want you to notice the beautiful flowers along the path." Indeed, as they went up the hill, the old cracked pot took notice of the sun warming the beautiful wildflowers on the side of the path, and this cheered it some. But at the end of the trail, it still felt bad because it had leaked out half its load. And so again it apologized to the bearer for its failure. The bearer said to the pot, "Did you notice that there were flowers only on your side of the path? None on the other pot's side? That's because I have always known about your flaw." Oh, yes, you have. "And I took advantage of it. I planted flower seeds on your side of the path, and every day while we walk back from the stream, you've watered them. For 2 years, I've been able to pick up these beautiful flowers to decorate my master's table. Without you being just the way you are, the master would not have had this beauty to grace his home. So I say to you, cracked pots of the world, you create beauty. God knows what it is that you wish were perfect, but somehow you can't make it be. There's one more story I want to share with you. Reverend Dr. Raymond Hargrove, who is the regional conference minister for the east coast of the state, preached yesterday, and he told this story. So there was this big fire at a chemical plant. And all the fire companies around the chemical plant were volunteer fire companies. And they came rushing in to put out this fire. And they tried and tried to put it out, but they couldn't get it out. And so the owner of the plant said, "I will give $50,000 to the fire company that puts this fire out, because in the middle of that plant, in a safe, are all the formulas for my chemicals." I'm not sure why it was a chemical plant, but anyway, Raymond's weird, so who knows. And they tried and tried again to put the fire out, and they couldn't get the fire out. So the owner of the plant goes, "Look, I will give whoever puts this fire out $100,000 to save those formulas." Actually, I think they're formulae, but Raymond's a formula. It's not an English major. Anyway, So, is that right, Heather? Is it Formula? Yeah, see? So, okay, I'm going to tell Raymond that. Actually, he can watch it on video. So they try even harder. They double their efforts, and they're trying really hard to get the fire out. And they can't get it out. Well, in the midst of all their trying, up rushes this fire truck full of volunteers 65 and older. And they go charging right into the center of the fire. They don't even stop. Right in. And they put the fire out. And the owner of the plant says to them, you know what? I'm going to give you $200,000 for putting it out. Whatever will you do with that money? And the guy driving the truck says, well, the first thing we're going to do is get us some brakes. We were down at this absolutely gorgeous church. It's the oldest historic public building in Coral Gables. It is magnificent. You know, it's got all those flourishes. It's kind of got that Spanish thing. Then it's got this big watchtower behind it. It's got a separate chapel with stained glass windows. It's got an education center. It's got all this neat landscaping in the middle with beautiful trees and plants and tiles and all this stuff. And I said to the pastor, you have a beautiful place. And then I took out my phone and looked at my photo of the new place we have. And I thought, this is the place for the cracked pots. No, I didn't. I thought, this is the place where we're called to be. This is the place that we will continue to make sanctuary. This is the place that we will offer extravagant welcome. Because we too are the United Church of Christ in Florida. And we're just as important as the bigger churches. Because it only matters that when we walk out the door, we walk out not empty-handed, not having had a good experience, but because together as community, we have made our experience a religious experience, a spiritual gift. And when we walk out, our hands are not empty, our hearts are full of God's love. And we take that and we share it in all the different ways each of us has of being in this world. And so we continue to be Faith Family United Church of Christ, not only in Florida, but in God's beloved community, in our one human family. Amen.